So, Catherine, I understand you are days away from graduating here at Mercyhurst. Yes. Okay. So, what is your degree in?
Anthropology and environmental science.
Okay. So, tell me about your involvement with the tiny forest here and sort of how it has played into your college experience.
So about 3 years ago, Dr. DeLance did a presentation on the tiny forest, and he was listing off all the research you could do. He was talking about carbon sequestration, and I'm very interested in climate change. And as soon as he said it, I went up to him after the presentation. I was like, I'd like to do this research. And then I helped at all the planting sessions that we had. And then eventually when we were deciding on my thesis to do for environmental science, I was like, oh, well, we'll just do the tiny forest carbon sequestration research that I was interested in 3 years ago. So that's what kind of sparked it, was just that one presentation Dr. DeLance did for like all of the students on campus. It was open to all students, faculty, and staff. So
okay, so you've been involved from day one, from the ground up. Okay, from literally the ground up, you've been involved. Okay, and so well, tell us a little bit about your research and sort of what the focus was and some of the things you learned and how this tiny forest fits into it.
So I pretty much took a census, as I like to call it, of the entire tiny forest. So before it was planted, we knew how many trees we had and what species they were for the most part. But I kind of went through, I measured the DBH and height of all the trees at that like 1 year mark, I think it was. Yeah. And I took the species ID, which was a little messy because I'm not the best at species ID.
Okay, part of the learning process.
Part of the learning process of my thesis. And I kind of just did that for all 560-ish trees that we have in here. And then I took that all into iTree planning software, which tells you basically how much carbon you're sequestering. And I have access to how much carbon we emit per each building. So I compared the square footage of the tiny forest to what we emit in one of our dorm halls.
Okay.
And I learned that it will take 50 years to sequester the amount of carbon it will take for our dorm hall to emit in 8 years. So it's a pretty bad number if you look at it from that perspective, but also that just shows of like how much more effort we need to put in as a campus, and the efforts we probably should put into our buildings, and how much the tiny forest can actually, its capabilities in carbon sequestering.
Okay, so that if efforts are put both ways, that can start to balance out in some way.
So it should be more of a positive number than negative in anything, just kind of like reinforcing that we need to put in that more effort. Yeah.
But so I think a lot of times with anything environmental, climate change, people sometimes think, well, it's such a big problem. How do I tackle it? But I mean, are you of the mind the fact that even though those numbers aren't what you want them to be, people should do something still?
Yes.
Like if you can do something, do it. Like plant a tree or plant a tiny forest or do it, reduce one thing that you can control.
Yeah, I think that it's such a big issue that people don't know how to tackle head on, that if every individual works to do one thing, then that will make a bigger difference than us being all like, this is too much effort for all of us to do. I'm just going to give up. Because even planting a tree, making a tiny forest, even though it takes years of effort, I think that's more beneficial than just like sitting back and thinking the problem's too big.
Sure, yeah. And if you start now, then we reap the benefits down the road. So,
yeah.
All right, so this is probably an unfair question, but we have been doing some social media posts of our staff on the Asbury Woods property in honor of Year of Trees. We've all been sort of saying what our favorite tree at Asbury Woods is. So do you have a favorite tree within the tiny forest?
I do. It's the tulip tree. I love the tulip trees because they're so easy to identify, and I'm not a botanist by any means, but just like the leaves, I mean, there's like a bunch everywhere. They're one of our most abundant trees in the tiny forest. I think like the second next to dogwood. I just love, they're very pretty. And I know when they flower, they actually look like tulips. So I'm excited to when we get to that point, but they're just the best.
Yeah. They are beautiful. We have a lot of them on the Asbury Woods property, the tulip trees, and they are just, the leaves are just beautiful in themselves, and they are easy to identify because like you, I'm often using technology, the Seek app, to identify plants and trees and things. But the tulip tree is one I always know what it is. So yeah. Well, is there anything else you'd like to share?
I don't think so.
Okay. Thanks so much.
We love the tiny forest.
Yeah.